When we think about great leaders, we often focus on their accomplishments, their power, or their influence. But behind every remarkable life, there is someone whose quiet strength and unconditional love made it possible. Tonight, I want to tell you a story, not just about a man you may know well, but about the woman who shaped him long before the world ever did. This is the story of Mary Ann MacLeod Trump, an immigrant, a mother, a woman of resilience and grace. She is not simply part of history because of the son she raised. She is the foundation upon which his life was built. And to understand Donald Trump, the drive, the ambition, the resilience, you must first understand the woman who raised him. So I invite you to listen closely, because this is more than a story about one family. It's a reminder of the quiet power of motherhood, of the values that endure across generations, and of how one woman's journey from a small island in Scotland helped shape a president of the United States. When we begin to understand the story of Mary Ann MacLeod Trump, we must start where her journey began, on the windswept Isle of Lewis, off the coast of Scotland. It was a place of rugged beauty but also of hardship. Life was not easy there. Families depended on the sea, on the land, and on one another to survive. And it was in this world, surrounded by a community that valued hard work, faith, and perseverance, that Mary Ann grew up. She understood from a young age what it meant to face challenges with dignity and to build a life not from what is handed to you, but from what you are willing to create with your own hands. At just 18 years old, she boarded a ship with little more than her dreams and determination, leaving behind the only home she had ever known. Imagine the courage it takes to step onto a vessel bound for a country you've never seen, not knowing what waits for you on the other side. She was a young woman stepping into the unknown, guided not by certainty but by hope. That hope carried her across the Atlantic to the shores of America, a land that represented opportunity, possibility, and a future she could shape with her own strength. She did not arrive to wealth or privilege. Like so many immigrants of her generation, she arrived with almost nothing. Her possessions were few, but her character was rich. She worked as a domestic servant, caring for families who had far more than she did, cleaning and keeping homes that reflected a life she did not yet have. And yet, she never saw those years as defeat. Instead, they were part of her journey, years of quiet resilience, years that taught her patience, humility, and the value of persistence. Her faith was always her anchor. Raised in the traditions of the Scottish Presbyterian Church, Mary Ann carried with her a deep spiritual foundation. She believed in service, in grace, and in the quiet dignity of living a life rooted in purpose. That faith would remain constant through every chapter of her life, and it was something she would later instill in her children. It was not always spoken in words. It was lived out in example through her kindness, her strength, and her unshakable belief in the value of family. It is easy, when we think of history, to overlook the silent stories, the ones not written in headlines or remembered in books. But Mary Ann's journey matters deeply because it reminds us of the sacrifices so many women have made to give their children something greater. She arrived as a young immigrant, but she became the matriarch of a family that would one day shape the future of America. That transformation did not happen by chance. It happened because she was willing to sacrifice comfort for opportunity, fear for courage, and the known for the unknown. When she met Fred Trump, a young and ambitious builder in Queens, she was ready to begin the next chapter of her life. Together they would raise 5 children, but Mary Ann's influence within that family was unique. She knew what it meant to leave everything behind, to arrive with little, to fight for stability and success. She carried those lessons into her home, reminding her children of the importance of perseverance, of faith, and of striving for something beyond yourself. For Donald, her 4th child, those lessons were not just background noise. They were woven into his earliest years. He grew up with a mother whose life story embodied the essence of the American dream. It was not abstract, it was real, it was tangible. It was lived out each day in the woman who cared for him, guided him, and set the standard for what resilience looked like. What strikes me most about her story is how ordinary it might have seemed at the time, and yet how extraordinary it truly was. She was one of countless immigrants arriving in New York Harbor during those years, but her life would ripple outward in ways she could not have imagined. She was not seeking fame. She was not seeking power. She sought only a chance to build, to raise, to nurture, and in doing so, she became the foundation for a legacy that would extend far beyond what she could have ever dreamed. This story is not only about one family, it is about the millions of families who have taken the same journey, who came to this country with little more than determination, who faced uncertainty and yet found the courage to believe in what was possible. Mary Ann's story is their story too. It reminds us that behind the towering skylines, the success stories, and the legacies we remember, there are countless quiet sacrifices made by those who believed in something greater for their children. As we reflect on her journey, we begin to see how deeply it influenced Donald Trump's life. His drive, his determination, his refusal to quit when faced with obstacles. All of these qualities trace back to a mother who once crossed an ocean in search of opportunity. Her story gave him perspective, her example gave him resilience, and her sacrifices gave him the foundation to pursue his ambitions. And so, when we ask ourselves how a young man from Queens could one day rise to become the President of the United States, we must look first to the woman who gave him life, who gave him faith, and who gave him courage to believe that the impossible might just be possible. She was, in every sense, the beginning of his story. When we think about strength, it is easy to picture something loud, something forceful, something that demands attention, but the strength that truly endures is often quiet, steady, and consistent. The kind of strength that shows itself not in grand gestures, but in countless unseen sacrifices made day after day. That was the strength of Mary Ann MacLeod Trump as a mother. She entered a marriage to a man with boundless ambition, a man who worked tirelessly to build a real estate empire in New York. Fred Trump was driven, relentless, and consumed with his work. And while he was laying the foundation for a business, Mary Ann was building something just as important. She was shaping a family, 5 children, each with unique personalities, gifts, and challenges. It is no small thing to raise one child with patience and care, but to raise 5 in chaos of New York, in a household where ambition and responsibility were always at the forefront, that requires a kind of strength that can never be underestimated. Her role was not flashy, and it was not meant to be celebrated in the spotlight, yet it was essential. She created a home where her children were not only cared for, but grounded. She was the balance in a family that might otherwise have been consumed entirely by business and public life. She gave her children the stability of love, of faith, of consistency. That grounding mattered. It meant that no matter how busy their father was, no matter how much pressure existed in the world outside, they could always return to a home that was nurtured by her presence. Mary Ann's resilience as a mother showed itself in countless ways. She was not one to complain about the challenges she faced. Raising 5 children is demanding under any circumstance, but to do so while supporting a husband with a demanding career, while managing a household that reflected the family's growing responsibilities, while navigating the expectations of society in that era, it required endless reserves of patience and determination. She carried those burdens quietly, but powerfully. Her love was not indulgent, but it was unwavering. She believed in discipline, in teaching her children the difference between right and wrong, and in holding them accountable for their actions, yet she also gave them the assurance that they were loved unconditionally, that no mistake could strip away their worth, and that they had the ability to rise again after any setback. That balance between firmness and compassion is the essence of true motherhood. Donald, like his siblings, grew up under the steady influence of that balance. He witnessed firsthand the way his mother carried herself, with dignity, with strength, with an inner resolve that never wavered, even in difficult moments. That example left a mark. When he speaks of determination, when he demonstrates resilience in the face of challenge, there is a direct line back to the mother who never allowed hardship to define her, but instead used it as a reason to grow stronger. Her resilience was not only for her children, it was also for her community. Mary Ann was known for her generosity, for her deep involvement in charitable work, and for the way she extended herself to others in need. That is something often forgotten when we tell her story, but it reveals the heart of who she was. She believed that strength was not just for oneself, but for the benefit of others, and her children grew up watching her live that truth. It was not a lesson she had to teach with words. It was demonstrated every time she gave her time, her care, her resources to those who had less. There is also something profound in the way she embraced her role. In today's world, we often undervalue the quiet contributions of mothers who choose to devote themselves fully to raising their families. But Mary Ann's life reminds us that the home is often the most powerful place of influence. She raised children who would go on to shape business, philanthropy, and yes, even the highest levels of government, and none of that would have been possible without the stability she provided. What makes her resilience especially remarkable is that it was rooted in humility. She did not seek recognition. She did not ask for credit. She understood that her role was not to be celebrated publicly, but to leave a private imprint on the lives of her children. And yet, the impact of that role is immeasurable. The lessons she instilled, the strength she modeled, the love she gave, all of these continue to echo through the generations. It is easy to underestimate the power of a mother's influence because it is not always visible, but in truth, it is often the most enduring force in a person's life. For Donald, that was certainly true. His confidence, his resilience, his unshakable sense of determination, these qualities were nurtured in the home his mother created. They were born in the countless small moments, the encouragement after a setback, discipline when it was needed, the reminder that faith and family matter more than anything else. Those moments added up to a foundation so strong that it could support even the weight of extraordinary ambition. Her story as a mother is a reminder to all of us that the greatest strength often reveals itself in quiet sacrifice. That resilience is not about never facing hardship, but about choosing every day to rise above it. That motherhood, in all its complexity, is one of the most powerful callings a person can embrace. She did not lead a nation, but she led a family. She did not build skyscrapers, but she built character. She did not stand in the public eye, but she shaped lives that would one day stand before the world. And in that, her strength and resilience became not only the legacy of her family, but a testament to the enduring power of motherhood itself. She was, without question, the heart of her family. When we talk about the qualities that define a person, it is easy to assume they are shaped by external circumstances, by the world outside, by opportunities, by obstacles, or by fate. And while those things play a role, the truth is that character is often formed in the quietest moments of childhood, in the lessons instilled by those closest to us, in the values passed down not through speeches, but through example. For Donald Trump, so much of his character can be traced back to the woman who raised him. Mary Ann was not a loud presence in his life. She did not demand attention. Instead, she influenced in ways that were lasting, precisely because they were steady and consistent. She embodied discipline, resilience, faith, and grace. Those qualities became the foundation upon which Donald built his own identity. When people describe his determination, his belief in himself, his refusal to accept defeat, it is important to understand where those qualities began. They began at home with a mother whose life story was a constant reminder of the power of perseverance. As a young boy, Donald watched his mother live out her values every day. He saw her devotion to faith, how it anchored her in moments of uncertainty. He saw her unwavering strength, how she balanced a household and supported her family without faltering. He saw her quiet dignity, how she carried herself with grace regardless of the circumstances. Those lessons do not fade, they take root. They form the lens through which a child views the world. There was also something profound in the way she believed in him. Mothers have a way of seeing possibility in their children before anyone else does. Mary Ann was no exception. She recognized in Donald an energy, a confidence, a drive that was present even in his earliest years, and rather than temper it, she nurtured it. She reminded him that those qualities, when channeled with discipline and purpose, could become strengths that carried him far. That kind of encouragement matters. It builds a sense of self-belief that allows a child to take risks, to face challenges, to step into the unknown without hesitation. Donald's boldness, his willingness to pursue opportunities others might shy away from, his instinct to think big, those qualities were encouraged by a mother who never allowed him to think small. She taught him that ambition was not something to be feared, but something to be directed, and she paired that with the reminder that true success is not built overnight, but through perseverance and resilience. Her influence extended beyond ambition. She instilled discipline. In a family of 5 children, discipline was not optional. It was necessary. Mary Ann expected her children to respect order, to understand responsibility, and to value hard work. That expectation shaped Donald's approach to life. He grew up understanding that nothing worthwhile comes without effort, that persistence is just as important as talent, and that discipline is the bridge between vision and reality. But perhaps one of the most enduring aspects of her influence was her resilience. Donald learned by watching her that setbacks are not the end of a story, but simply part of the journey. She had crossed an ocean with nothing. She had built a family in a foreign land. She had faced challenges without complaint. That resilience became a lesson her children absorbed deeply. For Donald, it became second nature. When he faced obstacles in business, when others doubted him, when challenges threatened to undo years of work, he returned to the example of his mother, the refusal to give up, the ability to stand tall in the face of adversity, the conviction that no obstacle is greater than the will to overcome it. Her faith also shaped him in ways that may not always be visible but were always present. She lived with the understanding that there was a higher purpose guiding her life. She believed in values larger than herself, in principles that did not waver with circumstance. That perspective influenced Donald as well. It gave him a sense of grounding, a moral compass, and an understanding that success without values is empty. Even when life pulled him into the world of business and public life, those early lessons remained, reminding him of what truly matters. It is remarkable to consider how the personality of one woman could ripple outward so profoundly into the life of her son, but that is the power of a mother's influence. Donald's confidence, his resilience, his determination, his boldness, all of these qualities did not emerge in isolation. They were nurtured by a mother who believed in him, disciplined him, and modeled for him the strength of character that defines leadership. There is also something deeply human about this story. Behind the headlines, behind the achievements, behind the public figure we all know, there was once a little boy shaped by the love and guidance of his mother. It is a reminder that no matter how far someone rises, no matter how public their life becomes, their foundation is always built in the home, in the small lessons, in the values instilled by those who cared for them in their earliest years. And so, when we look at the man Donald Trump became, when we consider his unshakable determination, his belief in possibilities, and his drive to achieve, we must see in all of that the reflection of Mary Ann's influence. She was not just his mother. She was his first teacher, his first guide, his first example of strength. Her values live on in him. When we think about legacy, we often think about buildings, institutions, or achievements that stand the test of time. We think of legacies as things you can see, touch, or measure. But some of the most powerful legacies are invisible, carried not in stone or steel, but in the hearts and characters of those who come after us. That is the kind of legacy Mary Ann MacLeod Trump left behind. Her life was not defined by recognition or titles, but by the imprint she made on her children and through them on the world. Her story is a reminder that motherhood is not a background role. It is not secondary. It is central. Everything that Donald Trump became: his ambition, his resilience, his confidence, his belief in possibility, was shaped first at home, and while the world would one day know his name. It was Mary Ann who helped build the foundation for that name to mean something. That is the lasting power of a mother's role. It is not always seen, but it is always felt. In so many ways, she lived the truth that the quietest sacrifices often create the loudest impact. She did not stand on a public stage, but she built the character of someone who would. She did not negotiate deals or write laws, but she instilled the values that allowed her son to walk into rooms with the courage to try. She did not shape headlines, but she shaped a man who would go on to dominate them. That is legacy, not in what you achieve for yourself, but in what you pass on to others. Her influence also reminds us of the universality of motherhood. While her story is unique in its details, it reflects a truth we see again and again across families, across generations, across nations. The extraordinary impact of women who devote themselves to raising children with love and strength. Their names may never be remembered by history books, but their influence lives on in every life their children touch. Mary Ann's legacy is part of a larger tapestry woven by mothers everywhere who sacrifice, nurture, and guide, knowing that the seeds they plant will grow into something far greater than themselves. Donald Trump's story, in many ways, is an extension of hers. The qualities that drove him, that defined him, that propelled him into business and eventually into public life, those qualities were rooted in his mother's example. When he stood before challenges, he carried with him her resilience. When he spoke with conviction, he carried with him her faith. When he pushed forward, even in the face of criticism or doubt, he carried with him the lessons she lived out each day. And in that way, her legacy is inseparable from his. But it is bigger than that, because her legacy is not only reflected in the life of her son. It is reflected in the lives touched by his work, his leadership, his example. A mother's influence does not stop with her children. It ripples outward. It touches communities, nations, and generations. That is why we cannot overlook her story when we try to understand his. It is the foundation of everything that followed. Her legacy also challenges us to reconsider what we value. In a world that often celebrates visibility, recognition, and achievement, her life shows us the power of what happens quietly in the unseen moments. The hours spent nurturing, guiding, and teaching may not be applauded publicly, but they are the work that endures, because what is built in the character of a child will outlast anything else. It is that unseen influence that becomes the true measure of legacy, and while Donald Trump's life is extraordinary in many ways, the truth of his mother's legacy is something every family can relate to. We all carry within us the influence of those who raised us, who believed in us, who shaped us. When we were too young to even realize it, her story is not just about one family. It is about the universal truth that mothers leave a mark deeper than any monument. Mary Ann did not live to see all that her son would become, but the values she gave him, the strength she modeled, the resilience she demonstrated, those lived on. They were her gift to him, and through him, her gift to the world. And that is the essence of legacy. It is not about what we achieve for ourselves, but about what we give that continues long after we are gone. Her life reminds us that the story of every leader begins long before they ever step onto the public stage. It begins in the homes where values are taught, in the families where strength is modeled, in the quiet but powerful influence of a mother's hand, and it reminds us that behind every public figure is someone who helped shape them, someone whose sacrifices made their success possible, someone whose love gave them the foundation to rise. And so, as we reflect on the life of Mary Ann MacLeod Trump, we see not just the woman who raised Donald Trump, but the woman who gave him the strength to become who he was meant to be. Her legacy lives on in him and through him in all that followed. She was the foundation of his destiny.